Hi, my name's Paul Benson. Thanks for jumping in on this session. Today we're going to talk about self-employment and financial resiliency where you're self-employed. I host the Financial Autonomy podcast. I also have a book out by the same name, Financial Autonomy, and I'm a certified financial planner. Just before we get started, I wanted to let you know I've put together a quick sort of cheat sheet, if you like. It's just a two-pager that summarises the points I'm going to go through in this presentation, and it's got a couple of extra bonus points in there as well. So the URL to get that, it's on the bottom of the screen here, so have a look. Totally free. Just jump on there and grab it. I'll have the link again at the end of the presentation, but that might just save you, having to scribble down some notes. Grab that one and you'll be sorted. Righto, let's go. Okay, I'm going to start with the most obvious thing in terms of financial resiliency. This one's certainly not going to blow your mind away, but having a cash buffer is, of course, crucial. Okay, so cash buffer. And yes, my handwriting's not wonderful, sorry. But what I wanted to touch on here, and I guess I'm anticipating that some people listening to this are planning on their move to self-employment. So in this planning phase, I guess you need to be thinking about your cash buffer and how much you need to have there in terms of resiliency. But I'm also imagining that some people listening are already self-employed. Maybe you're a contractor, something like that. And so you've got a feel for how this works. And I just sort of wanted to float past a few ideas. So as a self-employed person, in contrast to when you're an employee, employees, of course, your money drops into your bank account every fortnight, nice and predictable and regular. When you're self-employed, it's lumpy, there can be gaps. So therefore you need that cash buffer to be able to ride out those bumps. Now, a key sort of central point is that what you need is a separate business bank account. Bank account, right? It doesn't have to, in terms of the bank product, be called a business bank account particularly, but the point is you've got a separate account that doesn't have your personal stuff, just all your business stuff runs through it. And you operate that with a bit of a float. And then from that, you can then pay yourself a regular wage so that in terms of your day-to-day living, you still have some reliability. Now, the amount of buffer, float, cash buffer that you have in that business account, it depends a lot on the nature of your business, how big the transactions are, but you need that cushion there and you need that separate from your day-to-day account. Now, the other important thing to just consider is that for most self-employed business people, you're going to have a quarterly cycle, right? So if we think, if we break this up, this is the end of the quarter and then a month later, right? So say if you took the first quarter of the year, starts 1st of January, 1 Jan, and it ends 31st of March. Okay, that's the first quarter, for example. Now, what should happen with your cash buffer is it should be creeping up a bit as the month goes on, all right? And probably even continuing to creep up. And then you're going to have to pay out a whole lot of stuff here, roughly a month, it's sort of 28 days to be technical, after the end of the quarter. And then you're going to use up some money and then it's going to do the same thing the next quarter. And the reason for that is because here you need to pay your quarterly BAS, which is the GST that you've withheld out of all your sales. Now, if you're a particularly small business, maybe you don't withhold GST. You only have to do that if you're doing turnover of over 75,000. So not everyone would do that, but most businesses would. You might also have, and probably not in the first year, but once you get going, your quarterly tax installments, quarterly tax. You might have super, especially if you've got employees. Now, a lot of them, you might choose to pay your employees super every month, but technically as a small business, you can pay it every quarter. So they all come due within 28 days of the end of a quarter. So the reason that you want to be aware of that is because I guess new players to the game might look at their bank balance here and go, oh, this is looking pretty good. I've got plenty of cash in the bank. I'll book a holiday or take some money out or something, and then they get further down the road here when they have to pay all this money out to the tax office and the various bits and pieces, and it's not sitting in the account ready to go. So first thing about being resilient, you need to have a cash buffer. You need a separate business banking account, and you also need to be aware of that quarterly cycle. Now, your business might have other cycles depending on tourism, for instance. Maybe it's busier in summer and less in winter, that sort of stuff. So that's specific to you. But as a general rule in terms of business, you've got a quarterly cash cycle and you need to allow for that and plan for that. All right, next item on the resiliency space. Let's get that out the way. Diversified income streams, right? Diversified income streams. And what we really mean there is that you got multiple customers. Multiple customers. Okay. Now, it could be that you're a contractor. Maybe you're contracting back to your old employer, in which case you may well start off, all you've got is one customer, that old employer. But that's not ideal for a variety of reasons. For one, if you've just got one person that's paying you, the tax office won't accept that you're self-employed. So in terms of being able to claim tax deductions for the various expenses of running things at home and mobile phone bits and pieces, you're going to have difficulty there, right? But more important than that, we're talking about resiliency, is that if that one employer decides, hey, I don't have any work for you anymore, then all of a sudden you've got no income coming in. It's that sort of binary situation of 100% or zero. And so you end up very much like an employee. You really want to try and get yourself to a position, if you're going to be self-employed, where you've got multiple customers. And even you could diversify that even further. You could diversify across geography. So say by state. So say, for instance, at the moment during COVID, if you did work and you had one customer in Melbourne where, lockdown's not much fun and nothing much is happening, but you've got another client in Perth where they're pretty much back to normal, then that could be a good outcome. Perhaps your Melbourne client isn't putting through too much work at the moment, but your Perth client is, for instance. So some geography across state, depending on what you do, maybe it's across industry sector. So I know someone who, a lot of his work he does for music festivals. And again, COVID sort of has knocked that one around a little bit. But then he also does work in the financial services space, which is how I know the guy. And that one's ticking over fine. So I guess not having all your eggs in one basket in a sector can be good. Not necessarily possible depending on your profession. Like if you're an acoustic engineer, then you've probably only got a certain, construction industry. So maybe diversification by state or geography is more relevant. But just give some thought to spreading it around, having multiple sources of income, multiple customers, because that's really going to improve your resiliency as a self-employed person. Right, next cab off the rank. Get totally out of the way, that one. Here we go. Okay, little bit dry probably, but we want to be protecting the downside, and the way we do that is with insurance, right? As I say, I know it's a little dry, but you've got to cover it off. Now, there's basically two broad types of insurance. You've got personal insurance, and then you got business. Okay, let's talk personal first. Income protection is a good start. Now, potentially, you could organise that. If you're still employed now and you're planning on your move to self-employment, maybe you could organise that beforehand. You might find it's easier to get as an employed person than as a self-employed person. But income protection, really helpful, especially as a self-employed person, because it's effectively extended sick leave. Normally, your income protection, it won't pay for the first, most commonly 30 days, but sometimes there's 60 or 90 days. So you've got to look after yourself for that initial period. But if you were still off work beyond that waiting period, then your income protection would start paying you a monthly benefit. And when you're self-employed and you don't have a lot of other safety nets, that's really, really valuable. So income protection, fantastic first start. The other one that might be relevant is trauma. Now, trauma cover, it just pays a lump sum. If you suffer, the policy will have about 40 different conditions. And if you suffer one of those conditions, they write you a check for the lump sum. Usually 50 to 100,000 is what most people have. Now, statistically, far and away the most common reason, especially for women, that this will get paid out will be malignant cancer. So, imagine a scenario where you're unfortunate enough to have, a cancer, ovarian cancer or whatever. And obviously, in terms of you being self-employed and running your business, that's going to be challenging. So trauma insurance, here we go. Here's a check for $100,000. You don't have to worry about work for the next 12 months or however long. Just concentrate on getting well. Now, it may be that you get some income protection benefits as well, but irrespective, you just got a lump sum of money, can cover any out-of-pocket medicals. You can just 100% focus on getting well. So they're the two key ones on the personal insurance. Personal insurance does also include life insurance and total and permanent disability, but they're not really specific to self-employment, so I'm not going to touch those for now. The second one is business insurance. And here you're thinking about public liability. Whoops, didn't do that very well, did I? Public liability. Depending on what work you're doing, professional indemnity, which is basically protecting you if you make a mistake. There's also the likes of directors insurance. But they're the main ones, right? Talk to your insurance broker. There may well be more, but they're the key ones. You want to have those in place because from a resiliency point of view, if something goes wrong, you don't want your whole business to be torpedoed, right? So you want to ensure that you've got appropriate insurance in place. Right. Next one. Still doesn't want to go. Here we go. Yes, underpricing. This one comes up all the time. Let's try green. Don't underprice. I see this a lot with particularly people that are just moving into new business, right? It costs money to run your business. I mean, we just had a look there at insurance costs, right? It costs money, and it's tempting, particularly when you're starting, to want to price your services to sort of make everybody love you, like you feel like you're doing everybody a favor. And maybe it's a little bit of lack of self-confidence, which is understandable. You're just getting started, but it can really hem you in if your prices are too low. Because obviously you need enough to pay yourself and earn a decent living, but you also need enough to cover expenses like insurance, maybe office or internet or mobile phones, these type of things. But you also need enough there for you to be able to perhaps go on some training some days, not do any work and do some professional development. You might need enough to do marketing, depending on the nature of your business. You need to be able to build up that bit of a cash buffer. And I guess also, the reality is, as a self-employed person, you're taking on more pressure, potentially more risk, more stress. You need to be rewarded for that. So you need to ensure that your prices are such that you are going to be rewarded for that. Because what can happen is people can move to self-employment. They get locked into these low prices because they've sort of won some business initially on the basis of these low prices, and they're fearful that if they put up their prices, then the customer will go elsewhere. So they're kind of locked into these low prices, and they end up working 12 hours a day or 6 days a week or something ridiculous, earning less than they would have if they were an employee, and they're kind of trapped. It's a terrible situation. So really be on the lookout for the danger of underpricing. Okay, have a good think. So I guess the key with that is do your numbers. Okay, I've seen it written that unless you have a spreadsheet, you don't have a business. If you're just designing something or other and selling it, and you haven't actually sat down and worked out, well, how much does it cost to make this? What are the materials cost? What's the time? Other inputs, bank fees, electricity, whatever. You got to think through what all your costs are, map that out. Right, per item I sell, it costs me $2. Okay, well then I've got to sell it for at least $4 to make that worth my while. Another good way you can go is think about, well, for this to be viable for me to be self-employed, how much do I need to make a year? And if you say, all right, well, I need to make whatever it is, $75,000 a year, then you could work backwards and say, right, well, then that means I need to make X amount per week, and I expect that I'm going to be able to do this amount of work per week. So therefore, per job or per hour, or depending on how you cut up your work, you can work backwards and say, right, well, I need to make that much. So then you can get, here's the cost of whatever it is for me to produce. And depending, like if you're an engineer or a consultant or something like that, then maybe you've got no physical costs, just a few overheads. In which case, then you do just have to figure in, well, how much do I want to make and what does that need to be? But in any case, do your numbers and check that your pricing's right, because it's a really common pitfall that I see a lot of people make when they move into self-employment. Right, what do we got next? Last one. This one is worst case scenario planning. Okay. A really, really good strategy. And look, I didn't know this when I started my own self-employment journey, but I wish I had. And so hopefully if I can share it with you today, it's going to help. Think through, and look, I do it on we use Trello quite a lot. You might want to check it out. On a Trello board, I have one that is about this worst case scenario planning. And what I do is list out what are the worst things that could happen in my business, okay? So let's say, and everyone's business is going to be different, but just as a few examples, right? One might be, dispute with business partner. What might another one be? I don't know, because I run a financial planning business, so a 30% plus drop, that's meant to be a triangle, drop in share market. Right, that would be bad for the business. What else? Like a cyber attack or fraud. That one always worries me. Attack or fraud. I don't know. I'm sure you can come up with some others. As I say, every business is going to be different. But nevertheless, work out what are the things that are really, man, that would really smash me, you know? And then figure out what I would do. So, and again, I'd have this on Trello. So each of these is a card. You open up the card and you'll list, right, in that event, here's what I'll do. So maybe the dispute with the business partner. All right, well, we'd have to split it. Maybe I've got to pay him out something, or maybe he has to pay me. But, you know, I've got a line of credit against the house or something that I could use to pay him out. And that's the way we'd go. If we had a 30% drop in the share market, you know, you might say, all right, well, the solution there is that I'd have to lay off one of the staff. Now, it's not a pleasant thought, but the point is you've at least planned for it. Here's what would happen. Maybe even you suspend your own pay for a while, or you work on half pay for a period, or something like that, right? Cyber attack fraud. Well, we make sure we have cyber insurance is a pretty good start on that. Your cash buffer, perhaps you use a password manager or whatever. As I say, everyone's different. Key is though, it's enormously helpful for you to have thought about, here are the worst things that could happen, and for you to have a plan. New worst things might come up and you can always add them to the list. But I can tell you, from a sleep at night point of view, doing this is enormously helpful. And again, the whole point of this presentation is around making you resilient. And if you've already thought about, here's some of the bad things that can happen, chances are most of them won't happen, but one day something bad will occur, and you can have a look and you can, oh yeah, that's what I said I'd do under this circumstance. And you've got a game plan. Of course, you might finesse it a little bit at the time and fine tune it. You're not going to have these things down to the dollar because there's always uncertainty. But if you've got a rough game plan, here's what I'm going to do, then you'll be able to move forward. Your business will survive. You will be fine. And you know, you'll live to see another day. All right. So look, there's my 5 points around resiliency as a self-employed person. I really, you know, I hope you get some good value out of that. I know it's pretty short and sharp, but I think when you are self-employed, resiliency is a really, really important consideration. So look, my name again, it's Paul Benson. And if you want to learn more, check out the website, which is financialautonomy.com.au. Check us out there, and particularly have a look at the book that we've got, because that outlines the framework, the financial autonomy framework, and a stream of that is all about self-employment. So I think you get a lot of value out of the book. So do check that out. But I hope that's been useful, and good luck on your self-employment journey. Bye.